You're listening to Lumpen Radio, WLPN 105.5. This is How to Make a Scene. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to How to Make a Scene, a ongoing conversation series on Lumpen Radio and co-prosperity. I'm Brandon Albandia, and we're excited to continue the series, which dives into the artist-run cultural ecosystems of the 1980s, 90s, and today in Chicago. How to Make a Scene is a collaborative effort between the Public Media Institute, parent not-profit of Lumpen Radio and Co-Prosperity, and Midway, a coalition of Midwestern artists organizations. The series is supported by the Terra Foundation for American Artists, part of the citywide Art Design Chicago initiative. Our aim is to connect veteran artist organizers with those working today through intimate events at Co-Prosperity, broadcasts on Lumpen Radio, and live streams on LumpenTV. For the past 6 months, we've been looking at Chicago's deep artist-run history of alternative gallery spaces, independent publications, socially engaged collectives. Our discussions were led by moderators who engage with artists who have built experimental infrastructures of support for themselves and their peers. These gatherings are platforms for sharing generational knowledge, informal oral histories, and strategizing for future impact. Today, we complete the series with a compelling intergenerational conversation with artist and educator Nicole Marroquin, speaking with the artist, educator, and curator Juarez Hawkins, artists Sarita Hernández and Selva Zafiro Luna, founders of Marimacha Monarca Press, and attorney and advocate Virginia Martinez. They'll be exploring an expansive perspective on art, publishing, activism, and community building in Chicago. This panel brings together diverse voices to discuss the intersections of identity, creativity, and social justice in the city's cultural landscape. So a little bit about the moderator. Nicole Marroquin is a transdisciplinary artist and educator who explores Black and Latinx Midwest histories of youth resistance movements, belonging, and spatial justice. Her essays have been published in the visual arts research journal Counter Signals, Chicago Social Practice History Series, Organize Your Own, The Politics and Poetics of Self-Determination Movements, Revista Contratiempo, The Quarantine Times, and Area Chicago Magazine. She has won multiple Propeller Awards, the Three Arts Make a Wave Grant, and Envisioning Justice Grant from Illinois Humanities, the Sor Juana Inez de la Cruz Women of Excellence Award for her work in the community. She is a member of the Just Seeds and Chicago Act Artist Collectives. In 2020, Marroquin was the recipient of a USA Fellowship. She is professor at the Penny W. Stamp School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I'm really excited to introduce this panel. I'm going to share some of their bios, and then we will launch immediately into the questions. First, about our panelists, I'm thrilled to introduce Juarez Hawkins, who is an artist, educator, and curator. She received her BA from Northwestern University and her MA in interdisciplinary arts from Columbia College Chicago. Juarez has exhibited widely, hosting solo exhibitions at Concordia University, the 33 Collective Gallery, the Southside Community Arts Center, and as co-curator of gallery programs at Chicago State University, she's organized exhibitions from the permanent collection as well as student work and established artists, including Richard Hunt and Marva Jolly. Recent curatorial projects include Black Clay and Shirley Hudson Vision Quest at Chicago State. The Love Affair Continues at the DuSable Museum, Intersectional Touch and Bill Walker, Urban Griot at the Hyde Park Art Center. Juarez is a member of Sapphire and Crystals, a collective of African-American female artists as well. And also, we're joined by Sarita Hernández, who is a teaching artist, oral historian, pie maker, garden caregiver, print zine maker, Salvador Mexican Califas based in Chicago. Sarita is co-founder of Marimacha Monarca Press, a queer and trans artist familia based in Chicago's South Side since 2017. They are interested in artistic interventions with historical archives and imagining alternative forms of social documentation, preservation, and activation of everyday histories, survivals, and resistances. They make queer and erotic plant-based pies in their DIY artist project at Pleasure Pies Shop, Rasquache Prints, and Sad Boy Zines. We're also joined by another member of Marimacha Monarca Press, Selva Zafiro Luna, who is an interdisciplinary artist and educator. Their practice integrates print media, garment design, word, and symbol to highlight queer opulence. As an educator, they've worked in schools across Chicago for more than a decade, and they're also a co-founder of Marimacha Monarca Press. And next, I'd like to introduce Virginia Martinez, who is a significant figure in Chicana feminist movement and a Chicago native attorney and advocate for women and children. She's one of the first Latinas to be licensed to practice law in Illinois and co-founded the Latino Law Student Association. Martinez was the first regional counsel in the Chicago office of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, or MALDEF, where she won the districting cases that led to Latinos being elected to Chicago City Council and Illinois legislature. She also served on the executive as executive director of Mujeres Latinas en Acción and was appointed to the Illinois Prisoner Review Board in 2017. Martinez has received numerous awards for her work, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois and the Outstanding Leadership Award from the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus Foundation. All throughout her career, she has worked in nonprofits and volunteered with projects like CARA Pro Bono Project, providing legal assistance to women in detention seeking asylum. An attorney, mother, and speaker, Martinez has always fought for change and recognition for Chicana women, working tirelessly to ensure the movement continues. I'm very excited to gather this group of people together because the work of all the people on this panel are all in some way or another aimed at building these critical infrastructures of care, which either directly or indirectly support our creative cultures. Their work presents us with a range of models that we can look at as we run headlong into a future that for many of us is not promised. I've prepared a series of questions that I would like to pose to all of you, although you don't have to answer all of them. If there's a question that speaks particularly to you, then we can go with that. And there's just so much that you all have to share that I think we're going to burn through our time really quickly. And so let me start out right away and just jump right in. I wanted to ask, what has felt special about Chicago as a place to organize or make art or to practice your advocacy? And I'm wondering, has any of that specialness changed or altered over the years? Maybe I want to start out by asking either Virginia or Juarez to paint a picture of Chicago for us.
I can start. As you mentioned, I was born and raised in Chicago. I now live in Oak Park, but still spend a lot of time in Pilsen and other communities in Chicago. And for me, even the thought, I had never even thought about going to college. But when I did decide to go, I had to go local because I needed that foundation of Pilsen to really support me. I wasn't really supported by my family in my educational efforts, even law school. But I stayed living in the same house and using the community base because it was the reason I actually went to college and law school, was to try and make a difference in my community, which I saw then as Pilsen, which then expanded to Chicago, which then expanded beyond. But it was to me a safe place and a nurturing place. There were community-based organizations being created. When I was in law school, Mujeres was created. I was part of OLAS, the Organization of Latin American Students. And so it was a place that provided both the reason and the support for my advocacy.
Chicago has like just incredible energy. There's so many artists who know each other and can intersect with one another. The communities, the creative communities intersect. And we've got such a good history of artists making things happen. Like the Southside Community Arts Center was really pretty much started by artists, groups like Sapphire and Crystals, which has like a 30-plus-year history. So still going on. I think the pandemic even strengthened that impetus towards activism. You saw so many people taking to the streets in terms of like protesting the George Floyd incidents, that sort of thing. And it's just a great place for things to happen here, both in the art scene as well as, you know, the community at large. There's always something going on here.
And I have sort of a sub question, and you alluded to that just a second ago, Juarez, about how the pandemic seems to have shifted things. I mean, overall, between the 80s and the 90s and all the dynamism and organizing that was happening then, how do you think things have shifted? Or do you think things have shifted at all?
I think there's a certain urgency now. I think particularly with the election coming up, people are starting, you know, if you had ever been complacent, now's the time that is shaking you out of your complacency. There's a lot on the wire. I was just looking at I started a African American history course at Chicago State, and looking at their states that are banning that sort of thing now. So the whole idea that, oh my God, what I've been doing for a living could eventually be illegal. Just, you know, that dystopian future, I'm just not feeling that. So I think that there's a lot of energy towards trying to maintain a way of life for artists, trying to maintain a way of life for those of us who are creative, who maybe go against the grain. But there are a lot of artists taking to the streets. So many of my friends were involved in protests, and just seeing this sort of ecosystem come up, I think benefited by social media, which we have now. So if you want to start a GoFundMe or, you know, get activists out of jail fund and things like that, it's a lot easier to get the word out. We did a thing back in 2005, just a great day in Bronzeville. And that simply happened by artists calling one another. It's like, show up on Sunday at the Southside Community Arts Center. And so maybe a couple hundred artists just showed up just for a photo op. So if that can happen by phone, imagine the sort of scope of what can happen now if you put something out on Instagram. It's like now certainly everyone can get in on it. Everybody hears it and knows it. But Chicago's just a great place to be an artist. I hear so many people talk about New York, and New York has its vibe, and folks who want to be there, go there. But Chicago, there's nothing like it. I don't think there's anything like it.
I totally agree. Thank you. I think this sort of dovetails into how we exist within these places and scenes within Chicago. And my next question, maybe we can start with Sarita and Selva, but it's open for everybody. Is when was the first time you remember calling yourself an artist or organizer and or activist or advocate?
Honestly, for me, it's when Sarita and I started collaborating. So this is even before Marimacha Monarca Press. This was Sarita and I working at a high school in Back of the Yards in an after-school arts program, and sort of meeting and giving each other that look that queers are like, kind of like queer, recognized queer. And since we were in my neighborhood, we were in Back of the Yards where I grew up, where I, you know, for a very long time didn't have a lot of queer people, didn't see a lot of queer people around. It was very special. And shortly after, you know, hanging out, Sarita's just like, you want to help me with this program that I started last year. Let's go make zines at Cook County with like the women inmates. And that was the first time I think I realized that my personal practice also intersected with activist work and trying to highlight stories outside of myself and in our community. And it just so happened that this cohort of people that were in our class all happened to be queer too. It was just like the most magical moment where we were all like, what? And so shortly after that was when we started collaborating as Marimacha Monarca Press. And that sort of continued that same thread.
Yeah, I would say similar to Selva. I feel like I had done organizing and like made creative work like as a student before I moved to Chicago, but I feel like now that I've been here for 10 years, like I think I it makes sense to me why I wouldn't be able to answer this question with it starting like in California, because I think this is my home now and like this is where I am committed to, and it feels important to yeah, just like be super grateful and about like Chicago welcoming me in, and taking me in as like a queer transplant, because not everyone can live where they're from, right? And so like um I think for me, like part of that history is so connected to organizing and being an artist. And yeah, being, I think, finally finding like a collective to connect with, right? People to like, we found each other. And I think seeing ourselves in each other and like our goals and everything like that, what we're committed to, what we hope for, our aspirations, right? Especially with like people from Chicago and being invited into that space, I think that's really when I started to be like, oh wow, maybe I am an artist. Like, maybe I like do some organizing. I just care, I just care. That's all. And so, yeah, I would say definitely started like more officially within the last couple years, honestly, probably like just before the onset of the pandemic, I started to really feel like, okay, I feel like I think I can say this now. Like I feel this, right? And for a while it was more of like, oh, I'm definitely an arts educator, right? And then I slowly started transitioning into identifying as like a teaching artist. And I think part of that was being able to connect more with organizer and the term organizer and artist in a collective setting, because that was important to me. Like it felt like I couldn't claim this without having heard it from community and without having like done it in collective, right? So I would say it was definitely Selva was such a big part of that and the collective too.
I would say I started claiming myself as an artist while I was working a corporate job. I was very interested in earning a living as an artist. So my undergraduate degree is in computer studies, and I actually worked in IT for several years. But I did like every community bazaar and church social and things to try to show my art, to say, well, okay, I'm here programming computers by day, but artist by night. But I was, affirming it then through the years of the art fairs until I finally like transitioned. Advocacy actually started during my corporate years as well. I stole 2 weeks to teach like the first Gallery 37 program. And, of course, my bosses were like, well, we can't spare you for 2 weeks. It's like, I'm not asking permission. I'm gone. See you in 2 weeks. And it was like just exciting to be around all these young artists, to learn do something else for a living besides just like writing computer code, but also too seeing that there was so much young talent that wasn't being supported. Parents that either couldn't afford or wasn't interested in their kid developing their creativity. And that's where I began to feel like, okay, I need to do something somewhere in my corner of the universe. I saw the same thing again when I taught at Olive Harvey, slightly different angle, but this idea that there were so many kids that one were struggling with just literacy and being able to handle college work, and then two that had no sense of their own history. I'm kind of a big fan of teaching people of color their material culture, and I think a lot of that started there. So just that idea of me like, I need to be a little beacon somewhere to say that these people deserve to be supported in their creativity, but also to be supported in the knowledge of who they are. I kind of felt like, well, the kid who knows his history might pull his pants up, carry himself with a little bit more pride, and understand that they do have a foundation, creatively as well as historically.
I think for me, the connection between art and advocacy became crystal clear when I had the opportunity to go to the UN Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995, because there were women advocating and talking about various issues, but in very creative ways. So there was a quilt, there were posters, there were dances, there was music, there were stick figures put on a tree with a reminder to us that we were there representing women who could not be there. So these stick figures were there as a reminder to us that they are here, whether they're here physically or not. We needed to remember why we were there, and that we weren't there for our own selves, but for others. And the clearest to me was all of a sudden in the outside area, we heard drums, and then as a march was coming, and there were drummers, and there was a woman who was dressed in a white, long-tailed white kimono, who was talking about an issue I had never heard of, which was the comfort women, Chinese and other women who were captured by the Japanese, and then forced into sexual slavery and never compensated. When after the war, they went back to their communities and were not accepted, could not work, could not get married, could not do anything. And now were getting older and had no funds to support themselves. I had never heard of this issue. And there were just pictures, there were just things all over the conference grounds that told us stories in a different way. It wasn't just having, which we did have, workshops. It wasn't speakers speaking to us in workshops. It was communities speaking to us, women speaking to us about all kinds of issues through the arts. It was just the most impressive thing I'd ever seen.
Thank you, all of y'all. I can't help but notice how all of y'all are talking about working with vulnerable communities, youth, and how you are in contact with folks who are not represented, perhaps in places of power or in places where they have agency. This is really one of the reasons why I was hoping we could all come together and talk about this. So let's turn this to Chicago and think about places in Chicago where you have felt particularly welcome, maybe while growing up or currently. Like, what are the sort of spaces or artist-run projects or artist-run places, where you see yourself being able to move and do the work in the world that you do?
There are several. One, probably not on an organizational level, but personally, is the home of Patrick McCoy, artist, photographer, collector. This man has like over 1,000 pieces of art in his house, largely by living Chicago artists, largely by artists of color. He hosts brunches on a regular basis, and it's just a place that is so vibrant and so alive because there's just art everywhere, floor to ceiling, every single room of the house. And this idea that there is someone who loves art and artists so much. He's really put his money where his mouth is, but the place has just, blossomed. And it's just like a very cozy museum where you could take your shoes off, and relax kind of place. I love being there. Other places, I think, would be kind of doubling back to Southside Community Arts Center. It also has a sort of homey kind of space. You can always kind of come back home to it. And it has such a great tradition in terms of arts and advocacy and activism and so on like that. And the fact that it's still around, still got the old walls with the holes in it. It's like what artists from history hung their work here. And I love those spaces. Those are spaces where I feel at home as an artist. I'll throw one more in. As a child, I grew up around the corner from the Wall of Respect, which was, I believe, 43rd and Langley. We lived right around the corner on Champlain. My mother kind of just volunteered to pitch in to help paint for the sports section. And that was really just a landmark. I was all of 5 at the time, but it was a landmark. You knew that you cut through the alley and hit Langley. It was there. You right around the corner. It was there. There were diners, back in the days where you could put a quarter in the jukebox and get like 3 songs for a quarter. I still have memories of those corner stores, just sort of that sense of place that was anchored in this really historical mural. At the time, as a child, I didn't think of it as history, but it tickles me now to see that it's getting so much attention, when for me, it was like, that was a landmark. That was just, a spot. You can meet people there. If I knew I needed to wait for my brothers, I wait for them there. That sort of energy, that sort of space.
I'm wondering, in addition, what it was like to be involved in the Casa Aztlan and Virginia, if you had much interaction there. One of the ways I was welcomed into the city when I initially moved here to teach art, the most recent time, was when I started to go there for events and realized how seamlessly activism and the arts were sort of woven together. And I'm wondering, Virginia, if you had much experience spending time there. I think the first time I encountered some of your work was in a video that was recorded there, interviewing you.
Oh, I don't remember a video, but I did often go to Casa Aztlan, Centro de la Causa, Mujeres, various community organizations, and knew some of the older artists who were working. So it is a place where I would get called sometimes because as an attorney, they would have questions. Can you come? We're going to talk about this and that. And I would go, but it was just a very comfortable place for me to go. I also volunteered to tutor children at Casa Aztlan. So I did have kind of a different role, but always participated in things going on in, community marches, in, working with Olas to go to, it was Jewel or one of the chains, to boycott grapes and lettuce. So I was always a part of those groups, not as an artist, not as an attorney, but as a community member, just all of us working together and bringing whatever skills we had to work. And that's why, as I said, it was why I stayed there through college, through law school, because it was my foundation. It was what nurtured me to, when I did decide to go into law, it was the reason. What I saw in Pilsen in terms of people buying their first homes and being not given correct information by one of the local real estate agents who ended up selling the same home over and over again to different Mexican families who he knew could not afford to pay, and he would give them, instead of going to get a mortgage, a traditional mortgage by bank, which they probably couldn't qualify for, he would loan them the money, but then he could take the house away the minute they missed a payment. So it was those kinds of, the knowledge of growing up there and realizing and seeing as I got older what was going on, but also the familiarity with the organizations as they were being created. I was there. I was not one of the creators or founders of Mujeres, but I was there. I went to some of the meetings. I was in law school and decided I needed to pay attention to law school. So but I knew who was involved. I knew what was going on. I later, started doing some classes for the women at the first site on 18th Street of Mujeres. So I have these long histories with people and with organizations there that made me feel comfortable, make me still feel comfortable, even though the community is changing. I still see the places that I know and can work with the community as well.
As far as safe spaces or like places where I felt welcome in Chicago, it's not quite in the art sphere. I'm gonna have to say it's like, it's not even a specific place or location, it's just queer events, particularly like queer nightlife and dance parties. I feel like those have been the spaces to hold me the most. As a person that was navigating identity in the early 2000s in back of the yards, I didn't see a lot of people like myself. I didn't have a community right off the bat. And so once I became keen to, events more than spaces, where it was queer community and everybody was safe, I mean, I think that really, really changed everything. And I think those events have changed throughout time since then till now. I think now they hold space for more things. Now you see vendors, now you see performances, things are now merging. All of these subcultures are becoming, are giving space to each other and are making space for otherness. And so I think for me was really, pivotal. And most recently, I think I did feel really held by Back of the Yards. I think it was really wonderful to witness change. I was doing a project with Lumpen Radio, sort of trying to capture audio pieces from the community. And so I hadn't lived there since the pandemic, so it's been a couple of years. So this felt like a welcome back. I would just go around, walk the streets, ask people if they wanted to share something, just met people that I hadn't before, went into, businesses that have been there since my childhood that I had never stepped foot in on 47th Street, and just witnessing the change, but also witnessing the culture remains and the permanence of community, I think was a really wonderful thing to witness most recently. And yeah, just seeing how many people are organizing and how many people know each other and the overlaps and the intricacies of that community. I think that was probably one of my highlights this year.
Well, thank you for that. I also wanted to ask all of you if there was anybody that you considered a mentor, either an artist mentor, a feminist mentor, an organizing mentor, or otherwise, here in Chicago, either while you were growing up or who is mentoring you now. I say to a group of people from whom I have received mentorship.
I think for me, it definitely, I feel so held and mentored by the land and like working in gardens. I spend so much time caring for like natural space, and along with that, caring for students. And I honestly feel so guided by like every single student that I've worked with. Like, I think I've learned so much and I continue to. And yeah, I think oftentimes we think that we could, or like the thing, right, is like, oh, mentors are like older than you, whatever. But actually, I feel like so guided by younger folks all the time, and also the natural environment for sure, especially like an artist living in this moment when, we're just continuing to see climate change unfold, and like, that's like the earth speaking to us, and we have to listen. And so I think that definitely drives and motivates me to organize, because not only is like the work that I'm invested in around environmental justice in my community, but it's also like, how do we make that information accessible to each other to be able to understand what is going on around us, right? Um, and and definitely, of course, like I feel like so many like homies and friends in Chicago who have just like welcomed me in. Definitely, like um, I feel so much guidance from, Maestro William Estrella, for example, like super, super inspired and amazing to just like witness, right? Like someone out here doing work and like being a parent and like all of these things. And also, like the homies at Huff Print, which is like an amazing print studio. And like shout out to Liz and Gabe who have been like just have guided and supported our collective as like a DIY print zine collective like for such a long time. Yeah, so those are some folks.
I feel really similarly to Sarita. I think I don't have one specific person. I do think that typically it's students or the youth that I'm working with that sort of pull me out of my old ways, As an artist and as a person with various practices, I think it's really common to sort of get stuck in your own ways. And then when you're presenting something to a group of youth and they're interpreting it their own way, you get to witness different methods, different strategies, just, different finesses. And I think that is constantly showing me that there's more than one way to get to an end product, right? Or to produce in general, and to question as well. And yeah, also a shout out to Liz and Gabe who have been so helpful. I mean, I did not think I was going to practice or create so much within printmaking, and just meeting them and the endless bounds of knowledge that they have and that they shared. And yeah, they've just been our print padrinos for sure.
I'll give a shout out to Marva Jolly, who probably checks off all the boxes: activist, feminist, artist. I had the pleasure of working with her at Chicago State, so learning some of the ins and outs of ceramics, but also working with the group that she co-founded called Sapphire and Crystals, which was a collective of Black women artists, started around like 1987, thereabouts, but rooted in an idea of self-determination rather than just sort of waiting around, hoping to be discovered. The group always set out to create their own opportunities. We've always been looking for shows, curating our own events, publishing our own catalogs, hosting our own auctions and things like that. So you had this group of women that was always in rotation, always making things happen. And Marvel was really, I like to call it finishing school. Heaven forbid you should bring your work for exhibition and it be substandard. You didn't want Marva to talk about you. She brought in so much wisdom and mother wit to the group and to the proceedings. I think everyone still really holds like a space of honor for her, for all that we learned from her over the years. And we're still trying to press forward. The group is still operating. We're looking at archiving our work. We've got about 30 plus years of history that right now is kind of contained in a big notebook, a big binder, but we want to find more expansive ways to archive that history. And then also one sort of, I guess, this for lack of a better word, to institutionalize ourselves. How do we move forward? Because all these years we've never been a 501c3. We've always been this just informal band of women who get together and say, well, let's do this, let's show here. And everybody has a part to play. We know who the designers are, we know who the curators are in the group, the writers, and so on. But it would be cool to institutionalize ourselves so that we can move towards bigger funding, bigger venues, do the museum shows that we think, we're worthy of.
I am almost 75. I'll be 75 in 2 months. And so growing up, there weren't a lot of mentors, examples. There were no Latino professionals. There would be, one Spanish teacher, and that was it. I became interested in the law because I was working part-time for two Latino lawyers in Pilsen on 18th Street. And that's how it started. So they were mentors to me because they are the reasons I went to law school. But as we were working, started doing things in the community, we were all growing at the same time. So we were mentoring each other. Organizations were all being created about the same time in the 70s. And we were kind of growing up together and helping each other. But one of the other lesson that I learned at the UN conference in Beijing was to always include young people. So I have made it part of my life's mission is that whenever I'm working with any project or going, or in any organization or creating groups, that we have young people because, well, number one, it's practical. I'm the generation that learned how to use manual typewriters and still have a problem with computers. So there's a practical reason. More importantly, people see things differently. And when you're younger, you may see things that we as older folks do not see and miss. And so it's clearly important that we always work intergenerationally and to make sure that we are not missing something and to use, ideas that come up, people who are younger, who have more energy, who have more creativity can help in our work, in our advocacy, in our service provision to the community. So that is clearly something that I think is important and something that I try to work with. So mentors are not always older people. They're your colleagues, but they're also younger people who are also your colleagues.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that. And as somebody who was raised by the children of Chicago public schools as a teacher who taught me so much. Let's hear it for youth as mentors and for always including youth. Seriously. And I think we are actually at time right now. I'd like to thank my panelists. This feels like the beginning of a very big conversation. So much more to say. But I want to thank all of you for this really exciting conversation. And I'm so grateful for all of you for the work that you do and for the work that you've done and for the work that is unfolding.
Well, thank you for having us. It's been an honor meeting all of you all.
Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you, guys. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Another learning experience for me.
I'm just so thrilled that y'all all know each other now. And that I know you as well. Thank you so much.
So thank you for bringing everyone together. I want to thank all our participants today and throughout our entire series and all our listeners. We look forward to what's in store for our future panels in 2025 with an expanded look throughout the Midwest region. As a reminder, all the panels are archived on Mixcloud, Vimeo, and 2024 Midway Atlas online, which will be published as a book in 2026. Recordings and details at coprosperity.org. Thanks for listening, everyone.